There is a good reason why Warlocks are one of the most popular classes in Baldur's Gate 3. The class just feels good in many different aspects. It's a very well designed class, controlling the tides of the battlefield through pure terror while your enemies are engulfed in darkness, not knowing what kind of torture they're going to endure, and that's only the beginning. Because having your own patron that enhances your power and using pact magic to make sure you're always on top of your game is a recipe for success. But most importantly, making sure your enemies are inflicted maximum pain before they perish. It's the calling of the fiend, the Warlock. And if that isn't good enough, the Warlock has access to one of the most reliable spells in the game right from the get-go, that they get to use more and more in a single turn as they level up. And as they level, they get more and more deadly spells, more and more crowd control, more and more synergies between their gear and their spells that will make sure their damage output becomes absolutely insane. So I ask you one question: what's there not to like? This video will focus on making a Warlock powerful early on, for like the first 6 levels or so, as optimizing a Warlock early on is quite different than later on. So without further ado, let's get into character creation and level 1. For cantrips, no way we can be a Warlock without having Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast is a powerful blast that does great damage against your opponent. It can deal up to 10 damage in its most unmodified form, and that's actually a really good range right out of the gates of character creation. The cantrip is also iconic to the Warlock class, so we take it, and it only really becomes better and better as you level up. Since then we have solid reliable damage, with Eldritch Blast being our first cantrip. I would advise to get something either defensive like Blade Ward or something with utility like Mage Hand for your other cantrip. Either option will be really good. For your subclass, I would recommend either Fiend or the Great Old One, as their special feature comes in the form of a passive, while Archfey gives you an additional action, which is definitely not even that bad, but using your action to cast it over, say, all the powerful spells that you will get is just not really worth it. Fiend gives you a bunch of extra sustain, as it gives you temporary hit points every time you kill something, and that's actually really good if you think about it. It's a lot of extra sustain to keep you alive. On the other hand, the Great Old One gives you a chance to frighten your enemy when you critically hit them, and that is also obviously great. But I'm going to go with Fiend. Reason being is not only the passives are really nice, but it also gives you the possibility to get powerful spells later on, in addition to the very useful passive features. For example, it gives us the chance to get Fireball, which, as you probably may or may not know, is one of the most destructive spells in the game. For the 2 spells that we're going to start off with, I'm first of all going to go with the Armor of Agathis. This is actually a really good defensive and offensive spell at the same time. It is a 2-in-1 spell. What do you want more? It also lasts till your next long rest, so you can benefit from it for quite a time. Now, it gives you extra HP, which is nice and all, but also every time an enemy hits you while you have it active, they get a bunch of damage as well. So by taking hits yourself, you can kill your enemies. It even promotes playing reckless, as you can now intentionally activate opportunity attacks from your enemies to kill them while you keep your main damage for, say, another enemy. So this spell makes you deadly just by existing, basically. For our other spell, I'm going to take the Arms of Hadar. This spell has a short range, but it doesn't matter because it's an AoE spell, and it's meant to be there to complement our single target damage spell, which is our Eldritch Blast. So it's a really good spell to use in addition to Eldritch Blast. You can hit a bunch of different things with it when you stand near them, and the spell deals 2d6 damage while preventing your enemies from taking reaction. So it's definitely a nice AoE spell so early on with some additional utility. Now, races is a funny story because honestly you can go with anything, literally. A few good recommendations from my side are going to be a Mephistopheles Tiefling for hellish resistance and the extra spell in the form of Mage Hand. Githyanki is also great for that medium armor proficiency, Astral Knowledge, which gives you proficiency in any skill at will, and various mobility enhancing benefits. Drow is great too for superior dark vision and hand crossbow proficiency, and human and half-elf are both great options for the armor proficiency that they give as well. Half-elf then gives you Fey ancestry, and human gives you another skill to be proficient in and some additional carrying capacity. Because human is a good race choice, it then also means that Will, which is the warlock companion in the game, is alternatively also a great option to make it your warlock in your party. And as you see, I just mentioned like half of the races in the game and they were all decent options. So essentially it really doesn't matter what you pick. I would just recommend you to pick whatever you like the appearance the most of. For your abilities, most important ability is going to be without a doubt Charisma. It scales all our spell damage, so get that thing to 17 immediately and give it the +2 bonus. Constitution is going to be the second most important ability in my humble opinion, since Warlock has a bunch of different good concentration spells, and having 16 Constitution with the +1 bonus gives us a higher bonus to our saving throws to maintain our concentration spells better. And it gives us more HP, so that is nice as well. The third most important ability is then going to be Dexterity, so we get that thing to 14 for the initiative and the armor class, and then finally we dump Intelligence and Strength like the worthless abilities that they are for a Warlock and put the remaining points in Wisdom, so essentially it becomes neutral without having any penalties, as there are still somewhat important Wisdom saving throws in the game. Now you will be level 2 really quickly, so let's also talk about level 2 before we proceed, as well as level 3 by the way, because level 2 and level 3 tie together in various ways. You will know what I mean with that statement in a second. Now, you will see a lot of people take Repelling Blast and Agonizing Blast at level 2 to make sure Eldritch Blast gets properly enhanced. In my opinion, and contrary to popular belief, this is kind of a noob trap. Reason being is that Agonizing Blast isn't really that good yet at level 2, as you only have one Eldritch Blast at this level and your Charisma is still at the starting level, which is at all times a maximum of 17, so the modifier doesn't add that much yet. Me personally, the boy, would instead argue that getting Repelling Blast in combination with Devil's Sight is much better. Now Repelling Blast is really good because it makes your Eldritch Blast have this push factor, so you can push your enemies off cliffs to kill them instantly thanks to the fall damage, for example, or you can blast them into dangerous areas like some of the other spells that we will unlock will create for us to bully your enemies properly and to make sure they take as much damage as possible. The extra control you get in the sense of repositioning your enemies at all times through Repelling Blast enhancing Eldritch Blast cannot be underestimated. It can be the difference between your enemy living and dying. Devil's Sight, on the other hand, will make us see normally in darkness, both magical and non-magical, to a distance of 24 meters. Now Devil's Sight will unlock a truly powerful combo with the Darkness spell that we can pick at level 3, hence why I grouped level 2 and level 3 together. This is a really devastating combo that comes online very early on in your adventure and will make our Warlock a truly powerful Dark Magician. The Dark Magician. How it works is that you can cast Darkness, which usually if you do so will blind everything inside of it, and you essentially can't make ranged attacks into or out of this area that has been engulfed with darkness. But the thing is, and here it comes, with Devil's Sight our Warlock has essentially immunity to this effect and can see as well as attack from the inside of the darkness. So none of the disadvantages applies to us while they all apply to our enemies. So what that then essentially means is that we can cast Darkness, stand inside of it and attack everything with our Eldritch Blast safely from the darkness, and then accordingly nothing can target us while we are standing in the darkness, so we have a very safe way to dish out damage and kill everything around us, and everything that dares to come inside of the darkness will be blinded, so we have an advantage against everything that enters as well. Now Darkness is a level 2 spell, so we can get it at level 3 and not a moment earlier, which means at level 2 we need to take another spell, and here I would just take Hex. Hex will amplify the damage of our spells, which will make Eldritch Blast pretty deadly early on, and you can also choose which Hex variation you want. Regarding which Hex version to use, it doesn't really matter. The imposed disadvantages on your enemy do not apply for saving throws, which is a common misconception actually. It just applies to ability checks. So in the context of combat, there is not a lot of utility here to be found. However, if you want to min-max the Hex variation, I would strongly suggest using the Strength one as your standard Hex option, because it will lower the chance for your enemies to shove you. If your enemies are dex-based characters, however, and so they use acrobatics checks to shove you around, you could alternatively also choose dex. You can know this by examining your enemies. And if you have sneaky characters in your team, you could also alternatively choose wisdom here, as it will help out with the enemy's perception checks to not detect party members that are trying to be hidden. Now, you can't use Hex and Darkness at the same time, as both are concentration spells, so I would recommend Hex for easier encounters to make sure you just clear them quickly, and Darkness for harder encounters with more enemies, as you can safely use it to make sure you can keep blasting Eldritch Blast safely for a bunch of turns. At level 3, you get to choose your pact as well, and Pact of the Blade isn't going to be really relevant for this type of warlock, as we are a blaster warlock and not a spellblade type of warlock, so that leaves Pact of the Chain and Pact of the Tome. I would say that the spells that Tome give you at level 3 aren't really that impressive. However, Pact of the Chain gives you a bunch of different summons that can actually be very useful and a great addition to your party. Now, I would strongly suggest you to read all of the effects of these to see which one benefit you the most given a certain scenario, but for example, you can use the Raven to blind your enemy to accordingly give you advantage on your next attack. Or you can use the Crab to impede the movement of your enemies, which is really handy if they are stuck in an area that you do not want them to escape. For example, it works very well with Hunger of Hadar, which is a spell we will pick up in a second to make sure your enemies keep being tortured and keep losing health in this area. But generally, the best all-around summons of the Warlock are the two at the end in my opinion, because first of all, they can turn invisible. So you can start out combat with these being invisible and accordingly move your summon to a favorable position without being limited to its movement to set up nicely for an attack. And generally, they also have very useful effects. The Quasit or Croissant can frighten enemies, which is a very useful CC to set up for your next attacks, while the Imp can sting, which is also a really hard-hitting attack for a summon, by the way, that also has a poison component. Make sure to summon every time you rest, because these summons stay with you from battle to battle until they die, essentially. I would definitely go for Pact of the Chain here for your pact. It will give you the most noticeable power increase right here. What you also definitely need to do is to subscribe to me and hit the like button and hit the bell button if you still haven't yet, because why wouldn't you, right? Why wouldn't you? At level 4, you get to pick another spell and cantrip. Nothing too crazy here. I would just pick utility-based spells and cantrip, as we already have great damage. For your cantrip, you can really take anything. For your spell, I would recommend maybe Command. Command is honestly a great option that you can get as a fiend. The fact you can make enemies drop their weapons with it means you can pretty much win a battle instantly. For your feat, we're going to go with ability improvement and put 2 points in our most important ability, Charisma. I would also now recommend doing Auntie Ethel's quest to get that +1 bonus to any ability that we wish, so we can use it on Charisma and get our Charisma to 20 and get a huge bonus to our Charisma modifier, which means we will become even more powerful going forward. Now, before we get into level 5 and level 6, it's time to talk about gear. Honestly, you do not need a lot of gear early on, because with just the right spells and playstyle, a Warlock is already really good. But there's one item in particular, or more specifically a staff, that is so amazing for a Warlock early on that it's absolutely mandatory to get, in my opinion. I would even go to the extent to say to just go out of your way to get it as soon as possible, and if you do so, you can probably get it as early as level 2 or level 3 or so. And 3, 2, 1, which staff am I talking about? Make your guesses. Yes, it's the Spell Sparkler. This thing is absolutely amazing for a Warlock, to the point you still want to use it at the end of the game, and you can pick it up right at the start of the game. You just need to path towards Walkeen's Rest right here, do the associated quest, which will be very obvious when you approach this zone. You literally can't miss it. Then accordingly, you get the Spell Sparkler as a reward for completing the quest. Spell Sparkler is really good because it adds 2 lightning charges to any spell or cantrip that you cast. So with the fact that we can cast Eldritch Blast at all times, we build up these lightning charges really fast, and for every charge, your Eldritch Blast will be amplified and start hitting harder and harder, and also make it more likely that your Eldritch Blast will land as well. When you reach 5 charges, you consume all your charges to make sure your next Eldritch Blast will hit super hard, as it will add another entire 1d8 roll of lightning damage to your blast. So conclusion, this staff is just too good for Eldritch Blast. Get it. Outside of the staff, I would recommend getting the Daredevil gloves in the Git Yankee Crash. It gives us a +1 to our spell attack rolls and has a really useful toggleable effect in the form of Daredevil Proximity. Daredevil Proximity makes it so that even if enemies stand near us, we don't get a disadvantage. That usually applies to spellcasting for when your enemy is being too close to you. So it's a really useful effect. Without too much spoilers then, but I would also recommend that this integrating Nightwalkers in the Grimforge, as it helps out tremendously with making sure that your character's movement isn't impeded by certain annoying ground effects. And it gives you Misty Step, which is really good on a Warlock, just a free teleport in the form of a spell. Till you get these really good boots, then you can also use the Misty Step amulet to get Misty Step much earlier in your playthrough. But when you get the boots, you can replace the amulet for something else of your choice. Finally, if your way of playing allows it, and I'm intentionally being a bit vague there, and because I'm trying to stay spoiler free here, the Spider Silk armor in the Goblin camp is then also really good. As already mentioned earlier, we have a bunch of concentration spell, so this armor piece helping us out with maintaining those is really nice. Now level 5 is a huge power spike for a Warlock, especially if you got the staff and some of the mentioned gear at this point. Your cantrips get enhanced, and in the case of Eldritch Blast, it means you get to cast 2 Eldritch Blasts instead of just one every single turn, and that's absolutely insane if you think about it. In combination with the spell Sparkler Staff that at this point in time you should have picked up, we build up 4 lightning charges in a single turn now every turn and deal a bunch of damage. You get to choose another Eldritch Invocation at this point as well, and remember what I said earlier about Agonizing Blast? Well, now it's a perfect time to get it, and it's in my opinion a much better time to get it than at level 2. We have high charisma now, we have multiple Eldritch Blasts every single turn, and all those Eldritch Blasts are accordingly going to be buffed massively with our staff, and now Agonizing Blast in addition as well. Regarding our pact, we also get a nice buff because our summons now have the possibility to attack twice every single turn instead of just once going forward as well. And if all of that isn't enough, we get to choose a level 3 spell now that includes one of the best spells in the entire game in my opinion, Hunger of Hadar. The very millisecond you level up to level 5, you want to choose the spell and get it.
You cast it and it covers a huge area, and everything inside will start knowing the true definition of terror. It can't possibly get any worse for whatever is caught inside, it just can't. First of all, their movement is impaired. They can now only use half of their movement speed. But everything inside also gets blinded, so we get the benefits of blindness, like having advantage on all of our attacks against them, while they get disadvantage on their attacks against us, and they can't cast or attack beyond a 3 meter or 10 feet range. But the CC is just the beginning, because see, at the start of the enemy's turn, every single turn they're inside, they get guaranteed cold damage applied to them. And at the end of the turn, which can in a lot of scenarios be a really meaningless turn for the enemy as they're blinded and have barely any movement, they roll a check to get damage yet again, but this time in the form of acid damage. So they can take damage twice within the same turn from Hunger of Hadar and slowly die over time inside of this destructive spell. And the damage is a very consistent source of damage, because like I said, the range of this AoE spell is really big. If something escapes from this hell zone, you just shove them back in.
Okay, Hadar, enough is enough. The fun thing with Eldritch Blast being properly enhanced with Repelling Blast is that we can use it to blast enemies back inside the Hunger of Hadar zone if they have the audacity to escape our torture. And you can use this powerful combo every single time when something does escape, as Eldritch Blast is a cantrip, so you will never run out of Eldritch Blasts. At level 6, I would just recommend getting Fireball, which we have thanks to our subclass, and with all the concentration spells and single target blasts, Fireball is just a nice quick AoE nuke for when we need it. I would also strongly suggest to use the replace spell option at level 6, replace Arms of Hadar and get Counterspell. Counterspell is really good on a Warlock. It gives you a ton of momentum in battle, as you can just ignore really annoying spells from the enemy if it succeeds, so basically just negate their turn altogether. Finally, we need to talk about the party composition. What are we taking out there into the battlefield? Warlock is a ranged blaster, so we definitely do need a frontliner to get focused on, like a fighter, like Lae'zel, or a barbarian like Karlach, or any multi-class variation that can tank. For our controller or support character that can also heal, I would strongly suggest a lore bard or a multi-class variation of a bard. The extra short rest you get with bard is absolutely insane for a Warlock, as all our spell slots reset every short rest, so the more short rest you have, the better. And then also because lore bards have really good CC options that can enhance our Warlock as well, for example by stacking more movement impeding effects in the Hunger of Hadar area, so it becomes even harder harder to escape for our enemies. And finally, I would recommend a physical striker, either a melee option like a monk DPS or a ranger like a ranger DPS. Having physical damage complement your mostly magical damage is going to be really good. And that's everything you need to know for this video. All the knowledge you obtained in this video can easily make your warlock pump for your entire adventure. However, I will also be making another video that focuses around a mid to late game warlock build, as well as go over some multi-class variations with a warlock that will be out soon. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to subscribe to not miss it, because there are a lot of fun builds out there to be made with the warlock class in Baldur's Gate 3.